The sun hung low over the dense canopy of Yellowstone National Park, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain of the Lamar Valley. It was late summer, the kind of day where the air carried the crisp hint of impending autumn, mingled with the earthy scent of pine needles and wild grasses. Sarah Jenkins, a 32-year-old wildlife photographer from Bozeman, Montana, had been trekking these trails for years, her camera slung around her neck like an old friend. She knew the valley's rhythms, the distant bugle of elk, the rustle of bison herds grazing in the meadows. But today felt different. A storm had rolled through the night before, fierce winds toppling ancient trees and scattering debris like forgotten toys. Sarah paused at a fork in the path, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Her hiking boots crunched over loose gravel as she veered left toward the Soda Butte area, a spot she loved for its hidden alcoves and glimpses of elusive predators. The trail narrowed here, flanked by towering lodgepole pines and the occasional aspen grove, their leaves shimmering like coins in the breeze. She adjusted her backpack, filled with lenses and water bottles, and pressed on, her mind already framing the perfect shot of a grazing pronghorn under the golden light. It was the faint, high-pitched whimper that stopped her cold. At first she thought it was a bird, maybe a distressed fledgling, but the sound repeated, sharp, desperate, laced with a vulnerability that tugged at her chest. Sarah froze, scanning the underbrush. About 20 yards off the trail, partially obscured by ferns and fallen branches, lay the culprit, a massive Douglas fir uprooted by the storm. Its trunk sprawled across the forest floor like a felled giant. The tree's root ball hung in the air, exposing dark soil and tendrils of moss, while its heavy length pinned something beneath it. She crept closer, heart pounding, careful not to snap a twig. There in the dim shadow under the trunk was a tiny wolf pup. No more than a few months old, its gray fur matted with dirt and pine sap, the little creature struggled feebly against the unyielding weight. Its ribs heaved with each labored breath, and its wide amber eyes locked onto Sarah's with a mix of fear and pleading. The pup's front paws scratched weakly at the bark, but the trunk had it trapped from mid-body down, compressing its hindquarters in a cruel vice. Whines escaped its muzzle, soft and heartbreaking, echoing the isolation of the wild where survival was never guaranteed. Sarah's stomach twisted. Wolves were sacred in Yellowstone, symbols of the park's resilient ecosystem, but seeing one so young and helpless hit her like a punch. She knew the packs in this area. The Druid Peak pack had been thriving after years of recovery efforts, but this pup must have been separated during the storm, perhaps chasing a squirrel or wandering too far from the den. She dropped to her knees, keeping her distance to avoid startling it further, and pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course, the valley's remoteness was part of its allure. She needed help, and fast. The pup's energy was fading. Its whines grew fainter, replaced by shallow pants. Before the story goes deeper, make sure to subscribe for more narratives like this. Kneeling there, Sarah's mind raced through the risks. Interfering with wildlife was strictly against park rules. Humans weren't supposed to intervene unless it was a dire threat to public safety. But this? Leaving it to suffer slowly under that tree felt wrong, a betrayal of the very wilderness she documented. She thought of her own dog back home, a scruffy mutt named Max who greeted her with wagging tail after every trip. This pup wasn't a pet, but the raw instinct to protect surged through her. Carefully, she shrugged off her backpack and rummaged for her multi-tool, the one with the sturdy blade her brother had gifted her for Christmas. Maybe she could lever the trunk just enough to free it, but the tree was enormous, at least 2 feet thick, weighing tons. The pup let out another cry, twisting its head to nuzzle at the bark as if willing it to move. Sarah's hands trembled as she approached, speaking in a low, soothing voice. "Easy, little one. I'm not going to hurt you." She remembered stories from the park rangers about orphaned cubs and the delicate balance of nature, but emotion overrode caution. Circling the trunk, she spotted where it had snapped at the base. The wood splintered but solid. If she could find leverage, maybe wedge her tool under a root or call for backup once she got signal, she might buy time. Just then, voices echoed from the trail behind her. Sarah turned to see a group of hikers emerging from the trees, a father and his 2 teenage sons, all decked out in REI gear and day packs. The dad, mid-40s with a grizzled beard and a Yellowstone patch on his jacket, spotted her immediately. "Everything okay over there?" he called, quickening his pace. His name was Tom Riley, a construction foreman from Denver on a family bonding trip, though Sarah wouldn't learn that until later. His boys, Jake and Ethan, hung back, wide-eyed at the sight of the downed tree. Sarah waved them over, relief flooding her. "There's a wolf pup trapped under this thing. I don't know how long it's been there, but it's hurt bad." Tom knelt beside her, his face hardening as he peered under the trunk. The pup's eyes darted toward the newcomers, its body going still in exhaustion. "Damn," Tom muttered, running a hand through his hair. "We can't just leave it. Jake, grab that branch over there, something long we can use as a pry bar." The boys hesitated, the gravity sinking in. Jake, the older one at 16, nodded and fetched a fallen limb, while Ethan, 14 and more squeamish, pulled out his phone to film. "Dad, should we call someone?" But Tom was already assessing, his workman's eye spotting weak points in the trunk. Sarah explained the no interference rule, but Tom's jaw set firm. "Rules are one thing. This pup's fighting for its life. We've got to try." Together they worked methodically. Sarah positioned herself to monitor the pup, murmuring reassurances while Tom and Jake wedged the branch under the trunk's edge, leveraging their weight. The wood groaned in protest, fibers creaking as they strained. Sweat beaded on their foreheads, the metallic tang of effort filling the air. The pup whimpered again, its tail thumping weakly against the ground, a flicker of hope or just instinct. Inch by agonizing inch, the trunk lifted, but it was heavier than they imagined, slipping back with a thud that made Sarah's heart lurch. "Come on," Tom grunted, muscles bulging under his flannel shirt. "One more push." Ethan joined in, adding his slight frame to the effort. And this time, the gap widened just enough. The pup scrambled forward on trembling legs, dragging its injured body free. It collapsed a few feet away, panting but alive. Its hind legs scraped raw, one possibly broken but no longer crushed. Sarah's breath caught, a mix of triumph and fear washing over her. The pup was out. But the forest was no place for an injured orphan. They needed professionals now. As the sun dipped lower, painting the valley in hues of orange and red, the group gathered around the exhausted creature, their impromptu rescue hanging in the balance of what came next. The pup lay there in the dappled light filtering through the pines, its small chest rising and falling in ragged bursts. Sarah watched it closely, her heart still racing from the exertion, as Tom and the boys stepped back, wiping grime from their hands on their jeans. The air smelled of damp earth and crushed ferns, the forest settling back into its quiet rhythm now that the immediate crisis had passed. But the victory felt fragile. The pup's hind legs splayed awkwardly, one paw twisted at an unnatural angle, and a thin trickle of blood matted the fur along its flank. It lifted its head briefly, amber eyes scanning the humans with wary intelligence, before dropping it again with a soft whine that pierced the silence. "We did it," Jake said, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief, breaking into a grin that lit up his freckled face. At 16, he was all lanky limbs and budding confidence, the kind of kid who dreamed of adventure but had never faced something this raw. Ethan, still clutching his phone, nodded vigorously, the video he'd captured shaking in his grip. "That was intense, Dad. Like, straight out of a nature doc." Tom clapped a hand on each boy's shoulder, his expression a blend of pride and concern. "Yeah, it was, but we're not out of the woods yet, literally." He turned to Sarah, who was already digging through her backpack for a clean cloth and her water bottle. "You know this place better than us. What now? Park rangers? Vet?" Sarah nodded, her mind whirling through protocols she'd memorized from years of volunteering with local conservation groups. Interfering was a gray area, but with the pup freed and clearly suffering, they had to act. "The nearest ranger station is back at the trailhead, about 3 miles. I can hike out and get a signal to call them. They have wildlife rehab contacts. Maybe the Yellowstone Wolf Project folks. But we can't just leave it here. Predators could scent the blood, or it might not make it through the night with that leg. The pup stirred then, attempting to rise on its forepaws. It managed a wobbly sit, but when it tried to shift its weight backward, a sharp yelp escaped, echoing off the trees like a distress call. Sarah's throat tightened. She could almost hear the phantom howls of its pack in the distance, wondering where their missing member had gone. Wolves in Yellowstone were no strangers to hardship, poaching, disease, territorial fights. But this pup's story felt personal now, a tiny life threadbare and exposed. "Easy, buddy," Tom murmured, crouching low but keeping his distance. He pulled a granola bar from his pack, breaking off a piece and tossing it gently toward the pup. It sniffed the air, nostrils flaring, but made no move to eat, too dazed or in too much pain. Tom's face, weathered from years on construction sites, softened with a father's empathy. Back in Denver, he coached Little League and fixed leaky roofs for neighbors. This was a far cry from his usual world, but the instinct to protect ran deep. "Boys, let's see if we can make a barrier or something. Keep coyotes or whatever away till help comes." Jake and Ethan set to work, gathering fallen branches and piling them in a loose circle around the pup, their movements careful and hushed. Sarah appreciated the gesture, though she knew it was makeshift at best. The Lamar Valley teemed with life. Grizzlies foraging berries, ravens circling overhead with their croaking calls. But daylight was their ally for now. She soaked the cloth in water and approached slowly, extending it like an olive branch. "I'm just going to clean you up a bit, okay? Hold still." The pup tensed as she neared, its ears flattening, but exhaustion won out. Sarah worked gently, dabbing at the dirt and blood, revealing the extent of the damage. Deep abrasions along its ribs, a gash from a jagged root, and that swollen hind leg, likely fractured. Up close, she noticed the pup's collar of soft gray fur, unmarked by the scars that older wolves bore from pack skirmishes. It must have been the runt of the litter, bold enough to venture out during the storm, now paying the price. A lump formed in her throat. She'd photographed wolf families before, capturing the fierce bonds of alphas and omegas. But this isolation was heartbreaking. As she tended to it, memories flooded back. Her first trip to Yellowstone as a kid, wide-eyed at the reintroduction of wolves in '95, how it had sparked her passion for the wild. Her dad, a park ranger himself, had taught her respect for nature's balance, but he'd also bent rules for mercy when no one was looking. "Sometimes," he'd say, "the wild needs a human hand." Sarah blinked away the sting in her eyes, focusing on the pup's shallow breaths. It nuzzled her hand once, a tentative lick of salt from her skin, and her resolve hardened. Tom paced nearby, glancing at his watch. "Sarah, right, you head out. We'll stay put. Keep an eye on the little guy. If anything changes, we'll holler." His voice carried the steady assurance of someone used to leading crews through tight spots. But Sarah caught the flicker of worry in his eyes, the what-ifs of stranding his boys in the backcountry. She stood, slinging her pack over one shoulder. "Thanks. My name's Sarah Jenkins. If the rangers ask, tell them we found it pinned under a storm-fallen fir. Cords are about 44. 9 north, 110, 1 west. And keep talking to it. Wolves respond to calm voices." With a final look at the pup, now curled slightly with its nose tucked under a paw, she turned toward the trail. The path back felt steeper now, her boots heavier with the weight of responsibility. The hike out was a blur of determination, sunlight slanting through the aspens in golden shafts that warmed her face. Sweat trickled down her back, but she pushed on, the pup's whines echoing in her mind like a siren's call. At last, the trailhead came into view, the parking lot dotted with RVs and a few lingering tourists snapping photos of distant bison. Sarah's phone bars flickered to life. 3, enough. She dialed the park dispatch, her words tumbling out in a rush. Location, description, the rescue. "It's a gray wolf pup, juvenile, severe leg injury. We had to intervene. It was trapped." The dispatcher, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, assured her a team was en route. Rangers with capture gear and a vet from the park's medical unit. Stay off the site till we arrive, ma'am. Good work spotting it. Sarah leaned against her Jeep, a beat-up Subaru covered in mud and bumper stickers from conservation rallies, and exhaled. But doubt crept in. Would the pup survive the handling? Wolves were resilient, but orphans faced steep odds. Starvation, infection, rejection by other packs. Back in the valley, Tom settled on a log with the boys, sharing water and stories to pass the time. Jake sketched the scene in a notebook, his pencil capturing the pup's defiant gaze, while Ethan uploaded his video to Instagram with a caption about heroism in the wild. The pup watched them intermittently, its body language shifting from fear to a wary tolerance, as if weighing their intentions. The forest hummed around them, squirrels chattering, a breeze rustling leaves, but tension simmered beneath, the weight stretching like the shadows lengthening toward evening. Miles away, Sarah climbed into her car, engine rumbling to life. Help was coming, but the real test lay ahead. Could they save this tiny survivor? Or would the wild reclaim what was rightfully its own? As she drove back toward the trail, the pup's fate hung in the balance, a fragile thread in Yellowstone's vast tapestry. The ranger's truck bounced along the dirt access road leading into the Lamar Valley, its tires kicking up clouds of dust that swirled in the late afternoon sun. Behind the wheel was Mike Harlan, a seasoned Yellowstone patrolman in his late 40s, with a salt and pepper mustache and a lanyard of badges clipped to his khaki uniform. He'd been with the park for over 20 years, long enough to witness the wolf reintroduction's triumphs and heartbreaks, packs decimated by mange, pups lost to careless drivers. Beside him sat Dr. Elena Vasquez, the on-call wildlife veterinarian from the park's medical team, her dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail, a tranquilizer kit and bandages at her feet. Carla's dispatch call had pulled them from a routine check on bison calving grounds, and now urgency thrummed in the cab like the engine's low growl. Storm damage everywhere after last night, Mike said, navigating a rutted stretch.
Heard it uprooted half a dozen trees in this sector. If it's a wolf pup, we're looking at complications. Hypothermia if it's been pinned long, shock from the trauma. Elena nodded, her gloved hands flexing. She'd treated everything from eagle fractures to bear cubs in her decade at Yellowstone, but wolves hit different. They were the park's poster children, their recoveries funding half the conservation budget. Priority is stabilization. If the legs compound, we'll need to airlift to the Bozeman Clinic. No way it's surviving rewilding with that kind of injury. Back at the site, Tom Riley kept his eyes on the pup, which had dozed fitfully in the makeshift branch enclosure. The boys sat cross-legged nearby, munching on trail mix to stave off the growing chill as the sun arced toward the horizon. Jake's sketchbook lay open on his knee, the pup's form rendered in quick, expressive lines. Its ears perked in imagined alertness rather than pain. Ethan scrolled through comments on his video, already racking up likes from friends back in Denver. Dude, that's epic. You saved a wolf. But the thrill was fading into unease. The forest's sounds sharpened at dusk, a coyote's distant yip sending Ethan's shoulders hunching. You think it'll make it, Dad? Ethan asked, voice small. Tom rubbed his beard, choosing his words. Nature's tough, kid, but we've given it a shot. He'd seen enough rough jobs to know optimism was a tool, not a guarantee. Collapsed beams on sites, workers pinned like that pup. Still, the weight gnawed at him. His phone had no bars here, and the trailhead felt worlds away. The pup stirred, lifting its head to sniff the air, its amber eyes catching the fading light. A soft growl rumbled in its throat, not aggressive but instinctive, as if reminding them of its wild roots. Sarah's Jeep crested the rise first, her headlights cutting through the gloaming like twin beacons. She pulled up short of the group, killing the engine and jogging over, her face flushed from the drive. They're coming, 5 minutes out. Mike Harlan's leading. He's the best with canids. Relief washed over Tom's features, and he stood to greet her, the boys trailing like shadows. Good timing. Little guy's holding steady. But he's favoring that leg bad. Didn't eat the granola, though. Sarah knelt by the pup again, her earlier cleaning holding up against the dirt. Up close, she could see the fine details.
the pup's whiskers twitching at a passing breeze, the subtle rise of hackles under its fur. It regarded her without the initial panic, almost resigned, and she wondered if it sensed the shift, the humans multiplying, the scent of authority on the wind. "Hang in there," she whispered, her voice carrying the lilt of someone who'd grown up reciting park facts like bedtime stories. Her dad had patrolled these same trails, his tales of wolf packs fueling her dreams, but this felt like stepping into one. The ranger truck rumbled into view minutes later, followed by a second vehicle hauling a capture trailer. Mike hopped out first, his boots thudding on the pine needle carpet, radio crackling at his hip. "Jenkins? You the one who called it in?" Sarah rose, nodding as she recapped the find. The storm-fallen fur, the pry job, the pup's injuries. Mike's eyes narrowed appraisingly at the scene. Then at Tom and the boys. "Appreciate you sticking around, folks. But this is federal land. Best if you clear out once we assess. No offense. Good instincts." Elena moved in efficiently, her kit open on the ground. She approached the pup sideways, murmuring in Spanish-tinged English to keep her tone neutral. A trick she'd learned calmed skittish animals. The pup's ears flicked, body tensing as she shone a penlight over its wounds. "Male, about 3 months. Dehydration setting in, but no internal bleeding I can see from here. Legs definitely fractured, tibia, maybe fibula too. We need to dart it for transport." Mike nodded, prepping the tranquilizer gun with a practiced hand. Pack dynamics are the wild card. If this one's from the Slough Creek group, Mom might come sniffing. We'll monitor for howls. The group watched as Elena administered a low-dose sedative via blowpipe, the dart embedding with a soft thwup. The pup yelped once, a sound that twisted Sarah's gut like a knife, then slumped into stillness, its breathing evening out. Jake winced, clutching his sketchbook while Ethan pocketed his phone. Filming felt wrong now, invasive. Tom placed a steadying hand on his son's back. The father's touch, a silent anchor, amid the professionals' brisk efficiency. They worked fast. Elena splinted the leg with lightweight foam and vet wrap, injecting fluids and antibiotics through a needle into the pup's flank. Its fur, soft as down under the grime, rose and fell steadily now, the pain etched in every shallow inhale. Mike radioed coordinates to base, arranging a chopper from Mammoth for the haul to Bozeman Deaconess Hospital's wildlife wing. ETA 20 mics. We'll sedate deeper for the flight. As they loaded the pup onto a stretcher, gentle lifts, padded with blankets from the truck, Sarah felt a pang of loss, like handing over a piece of the wild she'd claimed in that moment of rescue. Tom gathered the boys, their faces a mosaic of exhaustion and wonder. "Time to head out, guys. Let's grab some burgers at the Roosevelt Lodge. My treat." Jake hesitated, glancing back as the Rangers secured the trailer. "What happens to it now?" Elena paused, wiping her hands. "Rehab if it pulls through. Bones heal in juveniles like this. Then if possible, back to a pack or a sanctuary. Wolves are fighters." Her words hung in the air, a fragile promise against the encroaching night. Sarah lingered as the truck pulled away, taillights fading into the valley's embrace. The forest whispered around her, owls hooting their evening chorus, the rustle of unseen creatures stirring. She'd follow up tomorrow, file a report, maybe even visit the clinic. But for now, the pup's fate was out of her hands, carried into the hands of experts who bridged the gap between wild and human. Driving back to her campsite near Pebble Creek, Sarah replayed the day's chaos, the whimper that started it all, the collective strain of strangers united by instinct. Yellowstone had a way of binding people like that, forging bonds in the raw pulse of survival. Yet doubt flickered as stars pricked the sky. Rehab was no guarantee. Infections could turn deadly, or the pup might reject captivity's confines. She thought of the packs roaming free, their howls a symphony of resilience, and hoped this little one would join them again. The road wound dark and empty, headlights illuminating fleeting deer eyes, a reminder that the wild forgave no weakness. But sometimes, with a nudge from unlikely hands, it allowed second chances. The fluorescent lights of the Bozeman Deaconess Hospital's wildlife rehabilitation wing hummed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow on the rows of kennels and examination tables. It was well past midnight when the helicopter touched down on the helipad, the chopper's blades whipping up a frenzy of leaves and gravel before slowing to a whine. Dr. Elena Vasquez directed the transfer with clipped efficiency, her team of technicians wheeling the pup's stretcher through the sliding doors into the controlled chaos of the ER bay. The air inside was thick with the scent of antiseptic and damp fur, a far cry from the pine-scented wilds of Yellowstone. Elena oversaw the intake herself, her ponytail fraying at the edges from the long day. The pup, now tagged as Subject YNP-47 in their logs, was transferred to a padded enclosure, IV line snaking into its foreleg for a steady drip of saline and pain meds. Under the bright exam lights, the injuries looked even grimmer. The fractured tibia was a clean break, mercifully, but the swelling around the joint suggested bruising deep into the muscle. "X-ray it now," she instructed a young vet tech named Riley, who nodded and maneuvered the portable machine with practiced care. The pup remained sedated, its small body limp, chest rising in even rhythms that belied the trauma etched into its frame. Across town in her modest apartment overlooking the Gallatin River, Sarah Jenkins couldn't sleep. The day's adrenaline had crashed into a restless worry, her mind replaying the pup's amber eyes, the way it had nuzzled her hand in that fleeting moment of trust. She paced the worn hardwood floors, phone clutched in one hand, a mug of chamomile tea cooling untouched on the counter. Max, her mutt, sensed her unease and pressed against her leg, whining softly as if echoing the pup's earlier cries. Sarah sank onto the couch, scrolling through the park's wildlife hotline updates, nothing yet on YNP-47. By 2 a.m., exhaustion won out, but her dreams were haunted by howls and the creak of splintering wood. Morning broke crisp and clear over Bozeman, the kind of Montana dawn that painted the Bridger Mountains in soft pinks and golds. Tom Riley loaded his rental SUV at the hotel near the university, the boys still bleary-eyed from the late-night drive back from the park. Jake nursed a breakfast burrito from a drive-thru, his sketchbook tucked under his arm like a talisman. "Dad, you think we can go see it today? The wolf, I mean." Ethan's eyes lit up at the idea, his phone already buzzing with notifications from the video, now viral in their small circle, over 1,000 views, comments praising their hero dad. Tom hesitated, rubbing the stubble on his jaw. Back home, life was predictable. Job sites, soccer practices, the hum of Denver traffic. This trip had upended that, pulling them into something raw and unpredictable. "We'll call the clinic first. Don't want to crowd 'em." But the pull was there. He'd felt it the moment they pried that trunk, a surge of purpose that lingered like the ache in his shoulders. As they merged onto I-90 toward Bozeman, the radio droned updates on Yellowstone road closures from the storm. Ironic how one fallen tree had rerouted so many lives. At the hospital, Elena reviewed the X-rays over coffee in the break room, the images glowing on her tablet. The fracture would need pinning surgery, a delicate procedure under anesthesia, followed by weeks of crate rest and physical therapy analogs adapted for wild animals. "Prognosis is good if we catch infection early," she told Riley, who was logging vitals. The pup had stirred at dawn, its sedation wearing off into groggy awareness. It paced the enclosure on 3 legs, favoring the splint, a low growl rumbling whenever a tech approached too close. Elena watched through the observation window, noting the spark of defiance. Classic wolf resilience, the same fire that had allowed the species to claw back from near extinction. Sarah arrived mid-morning, her camera bag slung over her shoulder out of habit, though this visit wasn't for photos. The receptionist directed her to the rehab wing after verifying her role as the finder. Elena met her in the hallway, extending a hand with a tired smile. "Ms. Jenkins? Thanks for the heads up. He's a fighter. Ate a bit of ground beef this morning. No fever yet." Sarah's relief was palpable, a knot loosening in her chest as Elena led her to the viewing area. Through the reinforced glass, the pup lay curled on a fleece blanket, its bandaged leg extended, eyes half-lidded in watchful rest. Up close, even separated by barriers, Sarah could see the subtle tremors of pain, the way its ears twitched at voices. "It's incredible you all got him out in time," Elena continued, leaning against the wall.
Storm damage like that. We've had 3 similar calls this week.
But mostly smaller critters. This one's lucky. Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on the pup. We couldn't just walk away. My dad always said the park's about balance, but sometimes you tip the scales a little. Elena's expression softened. She knew the Jenkins name. Sarah's father had been a legend among rangers before retiring to a cabin near West Yellowstone. I get it. We're prepping for surgery this afternoon. If it goes well, he'll be candidate for soft release in a few months. Back to a surrogate pack if we can match his scent profile. Outside, Tom pulled into the parking lot just as Sarah emerged for air, the 2 groups converging by chance in the lot's shade. Recognition dawned, and handshakes followed, Tom introducing the boys, who beamed with shy pride. "We saw your video," Sarah said to Ethan, ruffling his hair lightly. "You captured the whole pry. Brave stuff." Jake pulled out his sketch, showing a detailed rendering of the pup mid-escape, the trunk looming like a villain in a comic. Tom chuckled, but his eyes held the weight of the what-ifs. "Heard it's doing okay? That's something." They talked in the crisp autumn air, sharing stories, the boys recounting the coyote yips that had spooked them during the wait, Sarah describing her hike out. A bond formed there, forged in the valley's dirt and sweat, the kind that turned strangers into allies. Elena joined briefly, updating them on the surgery risks. Anesthesia complications in dehydrated juveniles, the slim chance of compartment syndrome from the crush injury. But he's young. Bones knit fast. We'll know more by evening. As the Rileys headed inside for a supervised visit, Sarah lingered by her Jeep, the hospital's brick facade a stark contrast to the wild's untamed edges. The pup's survival felt like a small victory in Yellowstone's grand narrative. Reintroduction efforts, habitat fights, the endless tug between human encroachment and nature's claim. Yet doubt whispered, would he remember the hands that saved him, or revert to feral caution? She snapped a quick photo of the mountains framing the building, a reminder that the wild waited, patient and unforgiving. Inside, the OR lights buzzed to life, Elena scrubbing in with steady hands. The pup, darted again for the procedure, lay on the steel table, monitors beeping a steady rhythm. Incision. Pin placement. Sutures. The work was precise, a bridge between mercy and the wild. Hours later, as the sun dipped toward the Tobacco Root Range, the pup woke in recovery, a groggy growl signaling its return. The team exhaled collectively. Phase 1 complete. But rehab was a marathon, and the road back to the pack stretched long, shadowed by uncertainties that no surgery could fully erase. Tom and the boys left with brochures on wolf conservation, Jake vowing to donate his allowance to the project. Driving south toward home, the SUV filled with animated chatter, the adventure etching itself into family lore. Sarah, meanwhile, texted a ranger friend for updates, her evening spent editing trail photos, the pup's image superimposed in her mind. Night fell over Bozeman, stars wheeling above, as the little wolf pup dreamed, or perhaps remembered, the forest's embrace, one step closer to reclaiming it. Weeks blurred into a tentative rhythm at the Bozeman Deaconess Wildlife Wing, the fluorescent hum a constant backdrop to the pup's slow reclamation of strength. Dr. Elena Vasquez checked on YNP-47 twice daily, her rounds a blend of clinical precision and quiet optimism. The surgery site had healed cleanly, the metal pin stabilizing the tibia like an invisible scaffold. But rehab demanded patience, endless sessions of assisted movement in a spacious enclosure designed to mimic den-like security. The pup, now sporting a fresh collar for tracking vitals, hobbled on the splint with growing determination, his amber eyes sharper each day, scanning the room's corners as if mapping an escape route back to the wild. Sarah Jenkins made the drive from her Bozeman apartment every other afternoon, her Subaru's tires crunching over fallen leaves as autumn deepened in the Gallatin Valley. The visits had become a ritual, a way to stitch the day's chaos, the freelance photo edits, the emails from conservation mags, into something tangible. She'd park in the lot, flash her visitor badge, and settle into the observation lounge with a thermos of black coffee, watching through the one-way glass. The pup recognized her silhouette now, ears perking at her approach. A subtle wag in his tail that spoke of budding trust over instinctual wariness. Elena had nicknamed him Stormy in private, a nod to the tempest that had nearly claimed him, and Sarah latched onto it, whispering the name during feeding times when she assisted with raw meat chunks laced with supplements. One crisp October morning, as frost etched patterns on the enclosure's windows, complications arose. Stormy refused his breakfast, pacing in tight circles, a low whine escaping his muzzle. Elena arrived mid-rounds, alerted by the tech's urgent page, her stethoscope already in hand. The pup's temperature spiked to 102.5, a subtle fever signaling infection brewing around the surgical site. "Damn," she muttered, gloving up to examine the leg. The incision, once a neat line of sutures, now showed faint redness, a telltale warmth under her fingers. Blood work confirmed it. A low-grade bacterial invasion, likely from the initial crush wounds, resistant to the broad-spectrum antibiotics they'd started. Sarah arrived that afternoon to the news, her stomach dropping as Elena briefed her in the hallway, the scent of cafeteria meatloaf drifting from a nearby vent. "It's not uncommon in trauma cases like this," Elena explained, her voice steady but laced with the weight of tough calls. "We're switching to a targeted IV, vancomycin drip, round the clock, but if it doesn't respond in 48 hours, we might need to open him up again, flush the site." Sarah nodded, fighting the surge of helplessness that mirrored the pup's own confinement. She'd seen wildlife bounce back from worse, bald eagles with lead poisoning, orphaned black bears, but Stormy's youth made every setback feel amplified, a fragile thread in the park's ecosystem tapestry. Across state lines in Denver, Tom Riley found himself pulled back into the story through Ethan's unyielding enthusiasm. The video had exploded online, shared by a local news outlet and picked up by wildlife influencers, amassing over 50,000 views. Comments flooded in. "Real heroes in Yellowstone," and "Save the wolves." Tom fielded interview requests from a podcaster while at the construction yard, his hard hat perched on the desk as he demurred. "Just did what anyone would," he'd say, but the experience lingered, a counterpoint to the grind of pouring concrete foundations under Colorado's relentless sun. The boys, back in school, turned it into a project. Jake's art teacher displayed his sketches in the hallway, the pup's form rendered in charcoal with dramatic shadows evoking the fallen tree's menace. Ethan started a GoFundMe for Yellowstone Wolf Rehab, the page featuring clips from the rescue, pulling in $200-300 from strangers touched by the tale. Tom watched them with a mix of pride and quiet reflection. The trip had cracked open something in him, a reminder that life's blueprints weren't always rigid. On weekends, he'd drive them to the Rocky Mountain Wolf Sanctuary outside Denver, where they volunteered, cleaning enclosures and learning pack behaviors. "Think Stormy's like these guys?" Jake asked one day, watching a gray wolf pace a chain-link run. Tom squeezed his shoulder. "Fighter like them. We'll send a check to Bozeman. Keep the momentum going." Back at the clinic, the fever battle intensified. Elena adjusted the drip, monitoring Stormy's vitals through the night shift, her own sleep fractured by callbacks. By the second evening, as rain pattered against the windows, an echo of the storm that started it all, the tide turned. The redness faded. His appetite returned with a voracious snap at the offered venison, and the wine softened to contented huffs. Sarah visited at dawn, catching Elena in a rare moment of elation. "He's turning the corner," the vet said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Legs bearing weight now, see?" Through the glass, Stormy tested the splint, a tentative step forward that ended in a triumphant limp. His head held high. The recovery sparked a ripple of involvement. Park officials, tipped by the viral buzz, reached out to Sarah for a formal statement, weaving the rescue into their public education campaign. She obliged, her words measured. The whimpers in the valley, the stranger's grit, the thin line between intervention and nature's course. Tom got wind through a forwarded email. Coordinating a video call with Elena where the boys peppered her with questions. Would Stormy howl like a real pack? Could they visit? Elena promised updates, her screen filled with their eager faces, a bridge from Denver's suburbs to Montana's wild heart. As November's chill seeped in, frosting the clinic's paths, Sarah walked Stormy in a secure outdoor pen for the first time. Leashed lightly for safety, he sniffed the chain-link boundary, nose twitching at scents of pine mulch and distant elk calls from a recording Elena played to stimulate instincts. The air bit crisp, carrying the smoky hint of wood fires from nearby homes, and Sarah's breath fogged as she crouched beside him. "You're getting there, Stormy," she murmured, her hand hovering near his fur. He leaned into it briefly, a wolf's guarded affection, before pulling away to explore, a sign of healing, body and spirit. Yet shadows lingered. Rehab vets debated the endgame. Full rewilding meant scent matching to a peripheral pack, risky if he carried human imprint too deep. Elena confided in Sarah over lukewarm vending machine coffee, the lounge empty, save for the tick of a wall clock. "He's bonded a bit, looks to us for food, calm. But wolves adapt. We've soft-released success stories before." Sarah thought of her dad's old journals, filled with tales of reintroduced packs thriving against odds, and clung to that hope. The pup's arc felt like Yellowstone itself, resilient, scarred, but unbroken. Tom surprised them with a package. Custom sketches from Jake framed as Stormy's pack, donated to the clinic's waiting area. The boys dreamed of a return trip come summer, scouting trails for wolf signs. In Bozeman, Sarah captured photos through the pen's fence, her lens framing Stormy's progress against the snowy backdrop of the Bridgers. Each click documented not just recovery, but the quiet miracles of connection. Human hands mending what the wild had torn, one careful step at a time. The season turned, leaves stripped bare, as Stormy's strength rebuilt like the park's enduring cycles. But ahead lay the true test. Release or sanctuary, freedom's call clashing with the safety of walls. For now, in the pen's confines, he howled once at the moon's sliver, a raw, echoing cry that stirred the night, promising a return to the valley's untamed pulse. December's grip tightened on Bozeman, blanketing the Gallatin Valley in a hush of snow that muffled the world's edges. At the wildlife rehab wing, Stormy's enclosure had been upgraded to a larger indoor-outdoor hybrid, its walls lined with thermal mats to ward off the cold seeping through the cracks. Dr. Elena Vasquez paced the observation deck one frosty morning, her breath visible in the chill air as she reviewed the latest telemetry data. The pup's vitals were stable, heart rate steady, weighed up by 3 pounds from nutrient-dense meals of rabbit and bison scraps. But the debate over his future loomed larger than ever. Full rewilding into Yellowstone's packs required impeccable health and minimal human imprinting, and Stormy's weeks of care had woven threads of dependency that tugged at the team's resolve. Sarah Jenkins bundled against the wind as she pulled into the clinic's lot, her Jeep's wipers swiping away flurries that danced like errant thoughts. The visits had evolved into a quiet anchor in her routine. Mornings spent framing wildlife spreads for a National Geographic pitch. Afternoons here, bridging the gap between her lens and the living subject. Today, she carried a bundle from home, soft blankets scented with pine shavings from her last park hike, a subtle nudge toward wild familiarity. Elena met her at the door, steam rising from twin mugs of hot cider in her hands. "He's restless," the vet said, handing one over. "Pacing more, testing that leg. The pin's ready for removal next week if scans look good." Inside the pen, Stormy moved with a fluid caution, his splinted leg bending just enough to support a lopsided trot. Snow dusted the outdoor section, and he nosed at it experimentally, paws sinking into the powder with muffled crunches. The sound carried through the intercom, a reminder of the valley's winter silence where packs hunkered in dens, pups tumbling in drifts under watchful eyes. Sarah watched from the viewing port, her reflection faint against the glass, as he lifted his muzzle to the sky. A short, experimental howl that vibrated the air, raw and yearning. It hit her like a memory of her dad's recordings, played on rainy nights to teach her the language of the wild. "You're thinking release," Sarah said softly, turning to Elena. The vet nodded, her expression a map of pros and cons, etched by years of hard choices. Soft release into a holding pen in the Lamar first, acclimate him with surrogate pack scents. But he's imprinted some. Last week he followed Riley's voice instead of retreating. If we push too soon, he could get bullied out or worse, hit by a snowmobile on the roads. Elena's voice cracked slightly, the fatigue of holiday staffing shortages showing in the shadows under her eyes. The clinic buzzed quieter now, volunteers scarce amid family gatherings, leaving the core team to shoulder the load. Across the miles, in Denver's crisp suburbia, Tom Riley stared at his computer screen during a lunch break, the construction site's clamor fading as he clicked through updates from the GoFundMe. The fund had swelled to $5 earmarked for Yellowstone's wolf tracking collars, and Ethan's school presentation on the rescue had earned him an A+ and a feature in the local paper. Hero Hikers Save Yellowstone Pup, the headline read, with Jake's sketch splashed across the page. Tom leaned back in his office chair, the scent of sawdust clinging to his flannel, and felt a pull he couldn't shake. The boys had been hounding him for a winter trip north. Christmas break, they argued, perfect for snowshoeing and checking on Stormy. "It's not just a dog, Dad," Jake had said over dinner, his fork pausing mid-bite. "It's like part of us now." Tom had relented, booking flights and a cabin near Gardner for the holidays. Life's rhythms, site meetings, mortgage payments, felt distant against the memory of that trunk's groan, the pup's first free scramble. He'd even started reading up on wolf behavior, late nights with books borrowed from the library, learning how alphas mentored runts through brutal lessons. Ethan, ever the connector, had messaged Sarah through the clinic's public email, sharing video links and asking for photos. "Tell him we're rooting for you," the boy wrote, his words a kid's earnest bridge across states. Back in Bozeman, the pin removal surgery unfolded under the OR's harsh lights, Elena's scalpel steady as she extracted the metal rod with a faint clink against the tray. Stormy, under light anesthesia, twitched once, his paws flexing in dream chase. Post-op, he woke groggy but alert, the leg flexing experimentally in the recovery crate. Sarah waited outside, thumbing through her phone's gallery, images of the pup's progress, from bloodied rescue to this milestone. When Elena emerged, thumbs up, relief flooded the hallway like sunlight breaking clouds. Clean healing. 2 weeks of physio, then we trial the outdoor acclimation pen. The physio sessions became a dance of encouragement. Sarah volunteered for walks in the expanded yard, a harness clipped to Stormy's collar as he navigated snowdrifts, his gait strengthening with each step. The air bit sharp, laced with the metallic tang of frozen earth, and his breath puffed in white clouds that mirrored hers. "Good boy," she murmured, her gloved hand guiding without pulling. He paused to dig at a buried root, instincts flaring, then bounded a few yards ahead, playful almost, the limp fading to a subtle hitch. Elena observed from the deck, clipboard in hand, noting the spark. He's remembering. That howl last night? Pack call, not distress. But winter's harshness tested them. A blizzard rolled in mid-December, winds howling like the wolves themselves, blanketing the pen in drifts that forced indoor confinement. Stormy paced the edges, whining at the door, his energy cooped and fraying. Infection risk loomed with cabin fever, paws raw from circling, appetite dipping. Elena dosed him with anti-inflammatories, and Sarah brought recordings of Yellowstone howls, played low through speakers to soothe the isolation. One evening, as snow lashed the windows, Stormy pressed his nose to the mesh, eyes locked on Sarah's through the glass. The connection hummed unspoken, trust earned in crisis, now strained by barriers. Tom's family arrived on a red-eye flight, the airport's holiday bustle a stark contrast to the clinic's quiet resolve. They piled into a rented SUV, steaming windows fogging as they drove the snowy roads to Bozeman. Jake clutched his new sketchpad, pages filled with imagined pack scenes, while Ethan live-streamed glimpses of the mountains to his followers. Tom gripped the wheel, the landscape stirring echoes of that summer day, the valley's vastness, now cloaked in white. At the clinic, Elena greeted them warmly, ushering the group to the viewing area. Stormy perked up at the influx of voices, hobbling to the fence with curious sniffs. "He's come far," Elena said, as the boys pressed close to the glass. Jake's eyes widened, tracing the healed scars with his gaze. Looks stronger, like he knows we're here. Ethan nodded, phone forgotten for once, the raw presence overwhelming pixels. Sarah joined them, introductions flowing easy, shared stories of the pry bars creak, the ranger truck's rumble. Tom shook her hand firmly. Couldn't stay away. This little guy's got us hooked. In that moment, the room warmed. Strangers turned family by a whimpered call in the woods. Yet as they watched Stormy test his leg in the snow-dusted pen, Elena pulled Sarah aside. Scans tomorrow decide the release timeline. If he's pack-ready, we move him to the holding area in the park by New Year's. But blizzards could delay. Nature doesn't rush. Sarah nodded, the weight settling. Freedom's edge, where survival meant reclaiming the wild's indifference. Outside, flurries swirled, the pup's distant howl piercing the gale, a cry of anticipation or warning, as winter's trials forged the path ahead. The group's visit stretched into the afternoon, laughter mingling with the clinic's beeps, bonds deepening in the cold light. But beneath it all thrummed the uncertainty. Could Stormy shed his human shadows and run with the packs, or would Sanctuary claim him forever? As dusk fell, painting the snow in twilight blues, the answer hovered, fragile as a fresh track in the drifts. New Year's Eve dawned brittle and clear over the Lamar Valley, the snowpack crunching under the tires of the park's utility truck as it wound toward the acclimation pen. Dr. Elena Vasquez rode shotgun, her breath fogging the window in rhythmic bursts, while Mike Harlan gripped the wheel, his mustache rimed with frost from the morning's rounds. In the heated kennel crate behind them, Stormy lay curled on a bed of cedar shavings, sedated lightly for the transfer, his healed leg tucked beneath him like a secret kept through the winter's trials. The pin removal had been a success, followed by grueling physio in the clinic's yard, leash walks turning to free trots, howls echoing off the Bridger foothills as he rediscovered his stride. Scans confirmed it. No infection, full weight bearing, instincts sharpening like a blade against whetstone. Sarah Jenkins followed in her Jeep, the engine's hum a steady companion on the drive from Bozeman. The holidays had brought a fragile normalcy, family dinners at her dad's cabin near West Yellowstone, where stories of the pup wove into tales of old ranger patrols. But her thoughts never strayed far from Stormy. She'd spent Christmas Eve at the clinic watching him through the glass as snow fell soft outside, his amber eyes reflecting the twinkling lights she'd strung on the enclosure fence. Now, with the release approved by the Yellowstone Wolf Project Board, a mix of elation and ache settled in her chest. Rewilding was the goal, but it meant severance, the pup vanishing into the vastness where humans were mere echoes. The pen, a remote fenced compound hidden in an aspen thicket near Soda Butte, came into view, its chain-link perimeter camouflaged by drifts and brush. Tom Riley and the boys waited there already, having driven up from Gardner the night before, their SUV parked nose into the gate. The cabin they'd rented overlooked the valley, a cozy A-frame with a wood stove crackling against the cold, but sleep had been fitful, anticipation buzzing like the howls they'd heard drifting on the wind. Jake, now clutching a worn sketchbook filled with Stormy's likenesses, bounced on his heels, breath puffing in excitement. Ethan fiddled with his phone. The GoFundMe closed at $7, $200, every dollar funneled to Collar Tech for tracking releases like this. Tom stood steady, hands in his parka pockets, the construction foreman's calm masking the nod of pride and letting go. Mike cut the engine first, the group's convergence marked by crunching boots and muffled greetings in the sub-zero air. "He's ready," Elena announced, her voice carrying over the wind's low moan. "Soft release protocol. Door opens at dawn tomorrow, but we'll monitor from the blind for a week. Scent posts from the Slough Creek pack. Familiar territory sense. Should draw him in if he's got the fire." Sarah nodded, helping unload the crate, her gloves numb despite the liners. The pen's interior was den-like, a burrow dug into an earthen mound, scattered with bones and hides to stoke hunting drives. As they eased Stormy inside, the sedation fading, he stirred, nose twitching at the wild smells seeping through the mesh. The pup rose slowly, testing his legs on the packed snow, the hitch in his gait now a mere memory. He circled the space, paused silent on the powder, then paused at the inner fence separating him from the outer wild. His head tilted, ears perked toward the valley's distant chorus, a faint pack yip carried on the breeze, perhaps the very group he'd strayed from months ago. Sarah's throat tightened. Up close, she saw the scars faded to silver lines in his fur, the runtish frame filled out with muscle. "Go find them, Stormy," she whispered, her words lost to the wind but felt in the air between them. Tom watched with the boys, Jake sketching furiously, the pen's stark lines against the white expanse, Stormy's form a silhouette of resilience. "He looks home," Ethan said, voice thick, pocketing his phone to capture the moment with his eyes instead. Tom clapped arms around their shoulders, the father's embrace a bulwark against the chill. "We gave him the shot, rest is his." Elena coordinated the setup, trail cams triggered by motion, GPS collar snug around Stormy's neck, its signal pinging to the park's servers. Mike radioed base, logging the coordinates, 44, 92 north, 110, 05 west. The same valley fork where it all began, fate's quiet circle. As dusk bled purple across the snowfields, the group lingered at the blind, a camouflaged shack stocked with thermoses of soup and binoculars. Stormy paced the pen, his howls growing bolder, answered by echoes from the ridges. Revelry sounded faint from Gardner, fireworks popping like distant gunfire. But here, the new year arrived in nature's hush, the Milky Way wheeling overhead like a wolf's endless hunt. Sarah shared a thermos with Elena, steam curling between them. "Think he'll make it?" she asked, the question hanging like frost. Elena's gaze softened, years of releases etched in her lines. "Odds are 50-50. Packs accept the strong, reject the marked. But he's got fight, yours, ours. The wilds." Night deepened, the blind's lantern casting warm pools on their faces as stories flowed. Tom's sight mishaps mirroring the trunk's pry, the boys' school projects blooming into advocacy clubs, Sarah's photos landing a gallery show in Jackson Hole. Laughter cut the cold, bonds forged in summer's sweat now tempered by winter's forge. At midnight, a single firework burst over the valley, and Stormy answered with a full-throated howl, raw, triumphant, slicing the silence. It rippled through them, a revelation of survival's quiet injustices, the storm's cruelty, human rules bent for mercy, the pup's arc from pinned despair to this precipice. Dawn broke with a rosy glow, the pen's gate mechanism whirring open under Elena's remote. Stormy froze, nostrils flaring, then bolted, a blur of gray against white, vanishing into the aspen's embrace. The group held breath, cams capturing his dash, hindquarters strong, head high, the collar's light blinking farewell. Minutes stretched, then a signal pinged, movement toward the creek, pack sense calling. Tears stung Sarah's eyes, pride mingling with loss. Tom hugged the boys tight, their cheers muffled by gloves. Mike clapped Elena's back. Another one for the wild. They drove out in convoy, the valley unfolding vast and indifferent, bison dots on the horizon like sentinels. Back in Bozeman, Sarah would monitor the tracker feeds, her life resuming with photos and trails, but forever marked. Tom and the boys headed south, the adventure etched into family drives, a legacy of unlikely heroes. Stormy, now nameless in the packs, ran free, his story a thread in Yellowstone's weave, resilient against the wild's unyielding trunk. Months later, a signal confirmed it, integrated, howling with kin under summer moons. The rescue's echo faded, but its heart beat on and lives touched, a testament to mercy's reach. Leave a comment sharing what you thought about this story.